Hello, everybody, and welcome to our podcast, Unpacking Organizations, where Rupert and I talk about our passion topics. Rupert, welcome, and how are you today?
Great, as always, living the dream.
Unpacking Organizations, the Practitioners Podcast. Sponsored by Orgvue.
And very pleased to introduce Don Miller from Deloitte.
Welcome, Don. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And Don and I think it's safe to say we can say now we go back a fair while.
Yeah, it's coming up on, I think, 10 years, right?
It's going to be a good 10 years, yeah, I would guess. And we've spent some time in
Very cool.
various cities in the US over the years. But one of the last memories I have with you, Don, was I think 5 or 6 in the morning before going to bed in Manhattan on Times Square, and you were.
It might have been Times Square after a very good workshop, and we were inspired around what we could do together.
Exactly.
I felt like, but that was definitely that second workshop till 5 or 6 in the morning over some beverages was great. I'll never forget. That was the last time we saw each other in person.
And then you were catching a flight then back to Seattle, so that was happy memories.
I appreciate you staying up with me to see me off to the airport back home. You were too kind.
That summarizes consulting lifestyle. So definitely.
Yeah. Days of old, for sure.
Days of old. So Don, it'd be great, apart from the fact that we both suffer lack of wanting to sleep. Just be great for our listeners just to hear a bit more about you, your background, and how you got into this area.
Sure, my pleasure. So as you all mentioned, my name is Don Miller. I live in Seattle. I've been with Deloitte for coming into, this will be my 19th year. Joined them back in 2005, 2006. But really before that, I really didn't know what I wanted to do in the working world. I had started by being a finance and accounting major. That seemed like a logical sort of career. But even then I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with these degrees. And I stumbled into at a job fair, forensic accounting. And for those that don't know what that is, it's really around resolving disputes, basically being a forensic analyst, but for financial purposes, not for more of the things that we see on Law and Order SVU. And it was really fascinating because I got to use sort of, investigative tactics around why certain events happened, how did the organization get there, and then what ultimately should be, sort of a fair resolution. And I love that work. I worked for Arthur Andersen for 2 years. I was actually there when Arthur Andersen was closing its doors. We actually sold work the day Arthur Andersen was indicted. So I have that one on my list. Bankruptcy work of all things. So irony was high back then. I loved the work, but I kept thinking, well, what do I want to do beyond this? I had gotten my fraud examiner license, and I thought that was interesting. But I had seen my father, who worked in the corporate world in automotive, and had seen how maybe not having a master's degree and somehow limited individuals at that time, in the working world. And so I said, well, I'll get a master's in business administration, but I don't know for what. But I ended up choosing human resources, which got a lot of eyebrow raises when I told folks that I wanted to do that. So you want to get your master's in business, but in HR. And I said, yeah, the reason is I've worked with a ton of smart people coming out of college, but I've also seen, while they might be geniuses at, financial models and sitting on the stand, I had witnessed, through various parts of my career, folks that had gotten promoted while sleeping at their desk. Now that's inspiring and admirable, but that's not how that should work. So I said, I can keep doing this work and I love this work, but I think I want to be a better leader. So I'm going to get my MBA and Master's in Business Administration. I did that. I had the pleasure of interning at Microsoft in their HR Tracks internship program. Just incredible love for Microsoft in that program. Made a lot of good friends there, but the itch for consulting was still there for me. And so when I came back to Michigan State, where I got my MBA around organizational psychology and Masters of Business, I said I want to go somewhere. And Deloitte actually had an org design practice, and I ended up there. And I actually wrote in my MBA letter to join Michigan State that 10 years from then, in 2004, I would want to, be a partner in a place that I could do org design work, and I would be, working with a nonprofit in my off days and have a wonderful family. And the year and then I put that in a drawer and I never looked at it again, honestly. So then I was up for partner right around the time I had just made partner, managing director, right before Rupert and I met. And I was like, what am I going to say? And I pulled that out, and literally that's what I was doing. It was 10 years later. I was about to join a nonprofit or counsel a nonprofit in my spare time. And I was living out my passion around helping people organize, operate and deliver. And I'll say, that journey looked a lot like this maize shirt. That's why I'm wearing it today. Right. And that's often what clients are like when they're doing org design. And I've been doing that ever since. And now I've pivoted into how do we do that with digital tools, working with Orgvue and sponsoring our alliance. And I've moved on from our org design practice. And now I'm helping clients figure out how to take these project-based capabilities and actually work with folks like Deloitte around how to be your operate partner. So we're there with you every day versus just a project. So it's a new challenge for me and really enjoying it. So that's me in a nutshell. And when I'm not doing that, I'm with my, beautiful 2 children and wife here in Seattle, and just, enjoying the time that I have with them.
Amazing.
Fantastic.
And Don, when we're discussing before this, you were talking very passionately about the concept of a digital twin. And I think a lot of our listeners may or may not have heard the term. Full disclosure, my mother's an identical twin. So I know what twins are in the real world, but what do you mean by digital twin, and why is that relevant?
Yeah, I'm happy to kind of expand on that. Really, digital twin is a newer term in the world of, I think, organization and workforce concepts, but it's been around for a long time when we talk about information technology and network bandwidth, right? So essentially, a digital twin is a replicated scenario or a live model of, certain elements in a system and how they may perform or operate under certain conditions. At Deloitte, outside of the organization and workforce domain, we help a lot of large clients, from sports teams to large companies, on constructing digital twins of their, wireless network and information architecture, to scenario model threats, cyber, understand bandwidth, where do you make moves, how do you get ahead. And actually, it was my time early on with Rupert, and maybe it wasn't early, like 5 or 6 in the morning early, Rupert, but working with Orgvue, I became very very aware of the ability to just scenario model an organization structure and its workforce, simply without maybe a digital twin model, but more the what if and how can we model that and what does it look like and what is the cost. A digital twin goes a step further. It's a safe sandbox environment where you can explore and make decisions about your organization without necessarily affecting the people involved, but also the systems of record, the HRIS, the payroll systems, and others, so you can make thoughtful decisions. And I think what's interesting about the world we're in now is that with the advent of AI, machine learning, we can actually not only model different scenarios, but we can play them out. And in a world where, specifically for global companies, multinational companies, where we have works councils and labor regulations, I think, having digital twins around planning for demand for your workforce, or even organizational moves within your workforce, are so important, so that you're not necessarily taking everyone through those regulated processes, but you're being very thoughtful and efficient around why, so you can navigate them effectively, right? and also take leaders through those scenarios so they not only know, well, this is the ideal sort of set of decisions we'd like to make, but if we can't make those in that order, what is option 2 and 3, and we don't have to huddle back again, right? We've spent that time and probably less time up front.
Yeah, thinking through and understanding unintended consequences of decisions.
Right. And the more data that you have there, right, and whether it's your performance management ratings of individuals, right, respecting their privacy, we don't see who they are, but we or engagement survey or workforce listening information, financial information, we may find links to certain correlations between financial data and customer experience, employee experience that we knew were relevant, but we didn't think might tie into a scenario and what to watch. Financial statements are very much a lagging indicator, right? And so by the time we're looking at quarterly results, that may be too late around certain decisions. That's why I think if you layered in things like objective and key result indicators, right? The confidence to achieve something from the workforce may be something we want to lean into a little bit more as we explore more scenarios in tools like Orgvue or other digital twin technologies, because that usually tells us that if our folks aren't showing up today confident in the aspirational goals we have, I don't know how they're going to help us make the right decisions, or what do we need to do to help them make the right decisions if we're a little shaky, right? How do leaders, then commit their time to resolve that?
Don, I think we live in the new age of AI and technology, and everybody should be so familiar with these tools. But what I have experienced in my past life and as a practitioner is that people do not want to touch anything which changes people's reporting. And so, a work day or a single source of truth is a different than a digital twin. That's what I hear. Digital twin is more of a sandbox where you can play and break it. How do you think about making that shift for the organization where they're more and more okay with using these kind of digital twin scenario um, and integrating their changing organization into the digital twin, because the digital twin also has to keep updating itself because the organization is a living, breathing, changing, dynamic entity. So how does that whole change management and mindset change happens, because now people have to be okay with going in and making decisions which actually do not translate into real world, but they're still making decisions and they're okay with it.
That's a good question. I think the challenge, as my kids would say, in the olden days, watching a lot of
These days,
Bluey.
olden days or
Well,
before COVID
listen,
days?
they call the olden days the 80s, which I get a big kick out of, like more than you would know, right? I'm sure Rupert, you would the same, but thanks to Bluey. But I would say, it didn't, even back then when we were doing this on maybe spreadsheets, or we weren't using, different data sources, and it was more qualitative than quantitative. Now fast forward to today, where we have all of these technologies available to us to not only use the information, but have AI or machine learning help us process it faster. The question has always been, this is great, how do we put this into practice, right? How do we take what we think will be the right answer or the best answer or the most appropriate into the working world? And for many organizations now, that includes, how do we load it into our systems of record, our Workdays, our SAPs, our Oracle? The first thing I tell clients is, well, let's make sure we're really defining the issues we're solving for and the objective of why we're designing, right? That's tried and true. That hasn't changed for many years, right? How bold do you want to be? How fast do you want to see things, be implemented and change? But where we are changing kind of some of our guidance, or how it's shifted, is I know we're talking about tools, but we often talk about traps. When we're using technology solutions or AI, there can be a challenge where clients lean a little bit too much into, I want synchronous information moving between my system of record and the digital twin. I love that. but we don't need it for everything, right? If we're modeling a scenario, we also have to remind ourselves that we're modeling in a point in time. So we don't need the levers and joiners and the what was the next quarter of data, or someone just left the, what is the information from that, the reporting relationship, the individuals, the job levels, right? Everything else doesn't have to be refreshed on a every 2-hour basis, or even an every 2-week basis. And so that's where I think a lot of clients get stuck. I think, to your question around how do we get them past some of the anxiety of touching organizational reporting structure, the benefit here is that we're not. And in fact, HR or information technology working with the business to say, okay, we know that this is going to be the organizational moves. How do we match up the process of notifying the individuals and announcing our changes to the organization with when will this go effective? And that last bit, when will this go effective, is how do we sync that up with updating our systems of record? Because for a lot of major transformations I work on, honestly, even at Deloitte, when I moved from our org transformation practice into our human capital operate business, the systems of record around the Active Directory and what my domain was didn't change for, I don't know, 4 months. But thankfully my payroll kept coming, right? That's good, right? So all of those things matter, and we have to lean into that's what our HRIS and corporate data, technology, and digital experience leaders at our companies are so good at. And it allows them to be focused on that, because more and more, right, this is where digital twins get really exciting, because we're scenario planning. More and more, our technology leaders and clients and our people leaders, CHROs, chief people officers, are seeing a shared relationship and owning the digital and people experience, because the technologies they use become a big part of why their working experience, right? I love my technology. I can't get this video conference tool to work. But equally, how easy is it for me to do my benefits via an intranet? And so they see themselves as shared leaders of that employee and customer experience, and it's now starting to come together. So the digital twin only helps them be better at their work, and it brings a little bit of what a technology leader says, hey, I know this, right? It's just around how we make sure everyone has Wi-Fi at the stadium. And HR saying, this is great. It's kind of like workforce listening in a good way to really inform decisions. And so I think in the next few years, you're going to see this come together even more, presented around how do we manage the experience for our employees to better deliver great experiences for our guests, our customers, our clients.
And Don, it's one of the things that hopefully it enables is the ability to ask better questions.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, the analysis and the answer is only as good as the question. So, and hopefully it enables us to have more time to explore different questions and different impacts. So how do you think about going about the questioning and getting and reflecting more and actually being in the moment to ask more questions and come up with more insightful ways of thinking about, the what if is a question. What if this happens? What if that?
Yeah.
And
That's
how do you?
Yeah. Keep going.
No, go. I'm sort of done.
No, it's a really good question. I think working in a strategy, and I mean, or as you know, Rupert, organization design, workforce planning, organization planning, you're in this constant world of being in two different domains. One is, what is our strategy and what is our aspiration? But the real value is being able to quickly pivot that into, okay, is it going to work, right? Practically. Right. So, it's a balance of both. And I think you're absolutely right. The solution is only as good as the question and the information needed to get there. And I've had the privilege in the last few years to also work with our workforce analytics and workforce planning practices. And they've turned me on to, and I'm sure this has been around for a long time, but they've turned me on to a mindset of what must be true. So usually when we're defining the problem statement in organization design or workforce issues, it's, okay, what is really the question, right? And we help our clients narrow that down into not only the question they'd like to solve, but wouldn't it be great if we could? So play it in a positive manner and really outline the outcomes. What must be true being the second bit, which is what must be true to do that? And then what information, this is the newest piece that I think we can get, we've always asked it, but now we can get very explicit because the clients have this information or they might have enough of it where we can put it into a digital twin, right? The challenge really is how bold do they want to be or how comfortable are they providing that information, because the information, the technologies can securely hold it, like Orgvue and many others. It's just how bold do you want to be and transparent so you can really see that. And that last bit, like what information would we want to see? We come with a very explicit opinion where it's more data than less, more types of information as our MVP. And that's still the most exciting part and the hardest part with our clients today is getting them comfortable that the more data they look at, thanks to the tools and the ability to get to an answer, it's just getting them comfortable sharing more. So where I'm seeing things go quickly but maybe a little bit slower than I'd like is landing in a compromise of less data, going through the exercise, and they saying, what would be good? More data. Roll your eyes and say yes, and now we're doing it again. So, but that's just more, our clients and individuals getting comfortable that, the more information they use with these systems, the more they can, not only refine their question, but also see some of the leading indicators themselves, so they can ask the next tough question or what's on the horizon. Because all this is a series of moves. I got into this work because I believe that, it's always nice to show up to a place of work where, work is better for the people that you're leading, and those people are better at work. So, and that's kind of our human capital mantra at Deloitte. So I was like, well, yeah, of course, that's what I've always been trying to do, whether it's, working with Orgvue, org design, or, doing some of our operate services. How do we make it a little bit better, a little bit easier, and frankly, more fun? Because if those two things are happening, we can, be at our best, right, as humans, versus cogs in, some sort of hybrid of digital and the work we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Don, I love that there is more data, and we have tools to make better decisions based on data. But more data also can lead to analysis paralysis. So, how do you
Mm-hmm.
help your clients to nudge towards that, identifying where the golden nuggets are and shining that light to say that let's only look at this and don't go on the other rabbit holes?
Yeah, it's the biggest. It is, and I know I alluded to it earlier, so thank you for bringing it back. It is by far the biggest trap that I see for our
Mm,
clients that are leaning into digital twins and using these solutions, is over engineering their data. And it's becoming more and more important that we have experts that are not only experts in data science, but data science with a deep understanding of organizational and workforce data. In fact, last year we started up a people analytics, data science, or data engineering service within our people analytics practice. Mark Solo, my colleague, saw this, and I think it was a brilliant idea, because it's not just the people people data fields. I'll give you an example. So we've got a client right now. It was my first ever reseller agreement of Orgvue, Rupert. And I was very proud of that, where we were able to bring Orgvue in directly, and they just did another 3-year renewal. So they're really believing in the tool. And we've got, the client has their HRIT experts, they have their OD experts, and they're constantly doing, both small, medium, large sets of restructuring. However, they're going through some challenges right now, and it has less to do with the, facilitation of decisions. The client, both the business client and the organization design clients, have developed an obsession around calculating, when I move someone to a new role, how can I put in, formulas and calculations to immediately update their salary, or cascade all of where they're located, basically every field that would tie to that individual, can we just cascade it down? Because they wouldn't it be great if this digital twin can really just replicate all that in real time? And I am not a technical expert. I've had the pleasure of having some amazingly smart folks on my team that have taken a data refresh process down from 5 days to 7 days, or 5 days to 3 days to 1 day, right? I would be nowhere near that, other than to say it'd be great to get to 2 days. That would be my role in that conversation. So I find myself in those situations saying, what is the benefit of those formulas? Like, how is it helping us and you every day? And oftentimes this is where they'll start to conflate the system of record with the design work they have to be doing. And they'll say, I know Rupert, you can say, but you'll love this. I said, well, that sounds like something that you'd want, that some of the calculations that we're doing were important inputs. I say, I literally play, just kind of a curious advocate, saying, have we talked to, the HRIS, leaders around doing some of these calculations in your system of record as part of batch updates? Because it sounds like that's something that's more managing the business. And I mean, it's great you're doing it here, you figured it out, but that sounds like something they need to see more often. So it shouldn't be a digital twin up, right? It should be more of coming in. Oh, that's a great idea. So a lot of it's just, listen, this happens all the time. A CIO colleague of mine, there's a client actually lives here in Seattle with me, has said, if left to our own devices, we'll put technology in the way of like what the right thing is, versus taking a balanced view. Alaska Airlines was the first to put kiosks for check-in in the US. They were also the first ones to take it out, because it actually slowed down how long people were in the lobby versus talking to a tech-enabled agent. Now, what they have done, and this is on a podcast, we didn't do this work with them, but what they have done is they did digitize, bag check, right? So that you quickly do that. And now they're working on RFID for their members. So your bag has an RFID. You just have to drop it off, right? That was more valid. But when they had kiosks, because we're like, kiosks for everything, 18. It worked, but it got in the way of what was most important, right? Like, this is just another line before I go through security. They said, no. So that's the trap, right? Is leaning too much into the technology and forgetting the purpose. I know, Rupert, you were going to say something there.
Well, I was about to say, so what? Why are we doing this, and so what? And if we get an answer to this question, are we going to change an action in what we do? If we're not, we're probably wasting our time. And I think just because something's technically possible doesn't mean it makes sense to do it.
Yes, we must never forget that. Like, what is the rhythm of the work? Like, when are we meeting with the leaders?
No.
Well, the cost isn't as of like last week. That's fine. Just mention that. This is only the delta, like the improvement is still sizable. When we update it, it will still be there, right? That I find, clients that get really excited about the prospect may lean too far into that, and they just need to, take baby steps, right? It's not, we don't need to be real time and all that information.
Yeah. So unfortunately, I can't believe what happens to time, but it's at time. Talking about time. So, Don, we always finish with 2 questions, and I think you've probably spoken a lot about traps already. So the one tool and one trap. But if you would like to highlight one trap that you think would be relevant for people, maybe a non-technical trap, because I know we've gone to quite a bit of technical subjects, and one tool, practical tool that you think would be useful for people.
Yeah. And tool can be a technical tool or any sort of...
Any tool.
Any tool.
It doesn't have to be technical. Actually, maybe we can say a non-technical both.
Yeah, non-technical, non-technical both. I like that. I like that. You know, I would say, a trap to manage is to stay away as best you can from over engineering a solution, right? Whether it's technical or not. I think, the best way to start with a complicated problem, I think they always used to say, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, is, what must be true, and what is the minimum viable sort of next step that we need to understand to help make this organization, this workforce, this challenge a little bit easier. And what are we trying to solve for? What are we trying to improve, lessen the frequency of, and just attack it bit by bit. I think when we do that, no matter what we're doing, and quickly, right, it allows us to move quickly. It allows us to stay away from over engineering, um, and allows others to come along on the journey. And that's what we need, right? More folks to see the power of these things, and at least self-diagnose a little bit more. Um, you know, I think a tool that I think of that I use all the time is Deloitte's strategic choice cascade that we picked up from Dublin. And that sounds like a lot of words, but ultimately it is, you know, where do we want to play? How do we want to win? What is it going to take for us to do that? Right? What people do we need? What systems? What resources? Um, and it's a great set of 5 questions that, when you ask any organization or any leadership team, they're usually good at getting the first 3. And I didn't, I kind of summarized that. You'd have to look at it, but they can get to the, where do we want to play, and how do we want to win? But when they get into the tactics of it, which are questions 4 and 5, we get a lot of answers. And that just means that there's a lot more that we all can do to understand that. But when that mess gets unpacked, just like this podcast, unpacking org design, that's when the real work begins, and that's where the companies and leadership teams can really get an understanding of one another, and outperform each other in really good ways.
What is it called, Don? If you
It's
can
called
repeat that.
it's the strategic choice cascade.
Okay.
And it's been around for a long time. It's pretty public domain information. Roger L. Martin talks about it all the time. What's our aspiration, where to play, how to win.
It was a very applied. It's a really good book, actually, Playing to Win, and it's was applied in detail at Procter and Gamble.
Yep.
Really, it's an excellent book.
It's an excellent book, and just those 5 steps are just, boils it down to, what are we doing here? And that's, my clients will say, wait, this is where we start. I'm like, yeah, just checking, right? Like, it's like hitting the knee and making sure the leg goes, right? The first 3 usually works, and then you hit on 4, and then the arm moves, and then you're like, okay, we're in the right place. And anyone can use it.
It's another really good example of actually systems thinking. Actually, it's a very simple, but it actually breaks down and also deeply into Porter's activity system.
Yeah,
exactly,
which is configuring capability in an organization. So from a very simple question for where to play and how to win, all the way down into the capabilities that you need to be able to execute that, which is org design thinking. So
if you say strategy choice cascade on Google, you'll find the quick questions. But we always have to design from where the disconnect is. And even though our teams, our leaders, our clients will have a pretty good feel of what they think their challenge is, that those 5 questions, as Rupert knows, will really get to where we need to start from, or work out of. Yeah.
Amazing.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, I think we are at the time. And Don, this was fantastic. I know Rupert and I can keep going because there were so many discussion points that are still swirling in my head. So maybe I'll send you a long email. And I hope our listeners can reach out to you. So what's the best way if they would like to reach out to you?
Oh, they can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd be more than happy to reply to them. That's the easiest way to find me. And thank you so much for having me on. It really was a pleasure. Rupert, great to see you. Shradha, great to meet you.
Of course.
And I would be happy to come back on any other topics.
Amazing.
Likewise, it was our pleasure. Thank you, Don.
All
Take
right.
care and enjoy the summer in Seattle.
Yeah, likewise. Take care.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.
Unpacking Organizations, the Practitioners Podcast. Sponsored by Orgvue.